Hi, this is your professor, Judy Paparosi. Welcome to Human Trafficking and Slavery. You'll hear during this class often that I call this the hardest class you'll ever love. And the reason I call it's the hardest class you'll ever love is because emotionally this will be one of the toughest classes you'll ever take because what's happening in human trafficking, whether it's sex or labor trafficking, is one of the most horrible realities for so many young people, young children especially around the world. So the topic is very interesting, but it's very emotional. So please don't watch any of these videos around young people. No one should watch any of these videos unless you're a student of this class. Please go into another room to watch the videos. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is forcing or by fraud or by coercion someone to work for you as a slave by force, as I said, fraud or coercion, either in sex trafficking or labor trafficking. Sex trafficking involves forcing people into a form of prostitution, but it's not prostitution because there's no willing sex worker. It's forcing a child, all children are victims, anyone under 18 is a victim, or any woman or man into providing sexual services for somebody as a slave and not being compensated for it and being abused, etc. So force, fraud, or coercion are the three key words to understand that if anybody is forced into this or fraudulently led into this or coerced into this, it is an act of human trafficking. Now, everybody gets very upset about sex trafficking like I do, and I used to focus this class on it until I realized how deeply labor human trafficking affects not only its victims, but it affects all of us. All of us are touched by labor trafficking. And you will see that when we talk about the dark side of chocolate and we talk about the different products that we buy every day that could have been harvested either by a child slave or an adult slave. Slavery is alive and well in the world and the worst it's ever been in the entire world. As hard as that is for people in America who are ancestors of people who were slaves, the same stuff is going on now everywhere in the world. No country is exempt, not even the United States. You may see slaves in a restaurant or in a nail salon and not even know you're seeing somebody who's engaged and enslaved in slavery. It's unbelievable how enormous this crime has risen in the last 20 years. I was a prosecutor in the 80s and the 90s. I worked in prisons before that. I've been in the system working in the system since 1972. And I never saw one person prosecuted for human slavery. Now they had to change the laws to update them. They call it modern day slavery, but now it's become the second largest crime in the world in terms of the number of victims and the amount of profit. And then drugs are still number one, and guns were always number two, the trafficking of weapons. And now that slipped, believe it or not, to number three, and human trafficking is taken over. So you'd probably say to yourself, well, why did that happen, Professor Paparosi? It happened for three simple reasons. It happened because there are low or no startup costs to this crime. If you want to be a drug dealer, you have to have money. If you just want to enslave somebody, get on social media, start chatting with somebody, start dating that particular person, and next thing you know, you're asking her to turn tricks for you. And when she doesn't, you show her the videotapes that you've made about her that are terrifying for her to see. And so she's been duped into human trafficking. That's that fraud that I was talking about. So that was the low startup cost. The next one is high profits. One female slave can make for her trafficker $250,000 a year. You'd need a lot of money to make that kind of money with drugs with just one drug. $250,000 a year, multiply that by 5 or 6. And the last thing is got a really low rate of prosecution. And the reason it's so low is if I was a prosecutor, if a police officer pulled over a car and saw a man and a 13-year-old girl in that car, but there was a white powdery substance in the car, and the officer got permission or got into the car somehow with probable cause and was able to test the cocaine at the scene even and find out that it was cocaine, he'd be able to arrest that man. But pull over the same guy next week who has had his car cleaned with the same 13-year-old girl, and what's your probable cause? What if she's a victim of human trafficking? What's your probable cause to arrest him? You don't have one unless she blurts out, I'm a victim of human trafficking. And that rarely, if ever, happens. Did happen one, but she wasn't 13. But it doesn't happen because the trafficking victim is more afraid of her trafficker than she is of any police officer or any agent of the law and government in the world. So those three reasons, low prosecution, low startup costs, and high profits, are why this has become the #2 crime in the world. Okay, so that's your introduction to human trafficking. And just briefly, I will tell you the 4 course requirements. And just understand something about me. I love working with my students. Now, this is a WE course, so as I said, or may have said, there is a writing component. And the writing component is 10 short summaries of a trafficking in persons report. The Trafficking in Persons report is critical to everybody in the country should be reading it, at least know what's going on in our country. And it's basically created by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which has been reauthorized a few times. And that was our first federal response to modern day human trafficking. And it was a friend of mine, a congressman that I know, Congressman Chris Smith. He wrote it after he realized what was going on in the world. And there's different parts of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, very important, TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. But one part of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act is for our country, through our federal government's Department of State, it does an annual report called the Trafficking in Persons Report, which is a summary of the trafficking around the world and whether or not, if people are not trying to protect victims, countries are not trying to protect victims, we limit our funding to those countries. So there's a penalty, for lack of a better word, if somebody is what they call the lowest tier, which is a tier 3 country. So we will be looking at 10 different countries that we will study in this course. For example, North Korea, one of the worst abusers of victims of human trafficking in the world. So we'll be looking at those 10 countries. But at the same time, the good news is there's a really big movie coming out at the beginning of this class, like July 4th weekend, called The Sound of Freedom. Tim Caviezel, person of interest. I don't know if you know the actor, Passion of the Christ. He's the star with Mira Sorvino, who's one of my heroes for human trafficking. She did the first human trafficking movie, which is unbelievable. But a new movie is coming out called Sound of Freedom. So out of those 10 country summaries, you can go see Sound of Freedom and summarize your view of the movie in lieu of one of the 10 reports. And the other one, we had a conference this year at UNC Pembroke on American Indians and Native Americans and Pacific Islanders, and how those groups, indigenous communities and cultures, are impacted even more than we are by especially sex trafficking. And you can also opt to do a summary on the information I provide on indigenous cultures and communities. So if you're a Native American, you may really want to do that. So that's the first one. You have 10 summaries, and I will offer a WebEx on Wednesday, July 5th at 7 p.m. It'll be taped, so if you can't make the WebEx, you don't have to tell me. If you can't come to the WebEx, just grab the video the next day and watch it, because it's really good if you go over it with me, because I have some specific requirements. And I am a great grammarian. I have outstanding grammar. I don't make grammatical errors, and I write very well. So I'm here to help you in your careers to be the best writer you can be. The second and third parts of the course, and by the way, that's 50% of your grade. That's how important writing is in this course, because it's a WE, as I said. It's also an ICC, Indigenous Cultures and Communities. So you're getting two certified courses out of the way, which is great. And that's why I mentioned the one about the Indigenous Cultures and Communities. Okay, and I know I talk fast, but you can watch the video again and look at the syllabus, which I'm going to email out today, which is Wednesday, June 28th, the day before class begins. Okay, so that's your 10 summaries, and 2 of those can be optional for Sound of Freedom summary, the movie, or the Indigenous Cultures and Community. But the rest of them are 10. There's 10 summaries on the countries we're going to be studying. Okay, that's the first requirement, the written part of this course. The second part of this course is the midterm exam. The third part of this course is the final exam. They're only worth 10% each. I don't really, focus on exams. It's a great textbook, by the way, that I have picked, and I've kept it all these years, and it's very inexpensive, which is why I love keeping it, because it gives a global view. And finally, discussions. This course is 30% of your grade is discussions. So unless you have perfect, it's really important to be part of the discussions. Now, there's a lot of videos on there, but you only have to watch the ones you pick after the ones I say I really want you to watch them. But I don't care. If you can get an expertise on the subject by watching a video that you pick or you find on YouTube, I don't really care. Most of them are not. Most of the videos on here are optional. So don't see like 10 videos and get nervous. 1 or 2 may be required, or at least something in that topic are required. But the discussions are where this course happens. And I'm telling you, I respond constantly on the discussion boards. I'll be on here 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. I will keep up. I will make sure I respond to you quickly. And please get on there often and try to keep up with the course. This moves at a very fast pace during the summer. But I'm here by email. You'll see it right on the first page of the syllabus. And please calendar everything on the syllabus. And don't tell me you didn't know the final exam closes at a certain time, because everything is laid out in this course quite well. So welcome to Human Trafficking and Slavery. I hope this turns out to be the hardest class you'll ever love. And just be prepared for a real emotionally hard but super important course that you will take in your undergraduate work. Thank you.